Cartel Wives, Chapter 32.
Sentencing. Olivia. Sentencing was scheduled for Tuesday, January 27th, 2015, and getting to that day had taken forever. We'd waited over 2 years since Junior and Peter had signed their plea agreement.
Mia. Over all that time, the government had to make sure all testimony that Junior and Peter had given them was fact, and they had to corroborate their testimony with other witnesses. They weren't in a hurry. On a case this big, they had to do things right.
Olivia. But for 2 years, we all hung in the balance, and we were worried about so many things. One of them was the judge.
Mia. Judge Castillo had served on something called the Federal Sentencing Commission, which was a committee that outlined the levels that determined sentences for federal crimes. We were so afraid of him, because clearly, having been on that committee, he believed in the federal guidelines and he was there to enforce them.
Olivia. Federal crimes go up to level 43, weighing what your crime is with your criminal history. Given all that they'd done, Junior and Peter were off the charts. They would have been looking at life if they hadn't cooperated. But here's the thing. The judge could throw out the plea agreement and sentence them to whatever he thought was best. 99.9% of the time, the judge would go with the U.S. Attorney's recommendation. But there was still that 0.1% chance he might decide on something else entirely.
Mia. The other issue at hand concerned something called a 5K.1.1 motion, which the U.S. Attorney had recently filed. A 5K.1.1 asks the judge to consider a defendant's substantial assistance to authorities when he hands down a sentence. The U.S. Attorney had practically gushed about Peter and Junior when he wrote his recommendations, saying they voluntarily broke away from their positions in the highest echelons of the cartel world to transform themselves into extraordinary witnesses. Then he made clear that they were the biggest drug informants in U.S. history, having done more to dismantle the drug trade than anyone. He said that he and the other prosecutors hoped Judge Castillo would reduce the sentence to something at or near the...
So they sold them on these buddies was the big boys. They're offering up the most. You should have some leniency on these guys. These guys have suffered to get you this information. He's selling it to the judge. The judge sitting there, not very entertained. The judge is probably not entertained, but that's just my guess. I don't know. The judge might have been nice and had his hands tied. We about to see right now. The judge smash him because
the low end of the 10 to 16 years outlined in the plea agreements. In the weeks leading up to sentencing, I was really counting on the 5K.1.1 motion the U.S. Attorney had filed. I mean, I wasn't ignoring the fact that everything was ultimately up to the judge, but Peter and I thought things might swing in their favor. Besides, I thought, if they don't deserve the 10 years, then who does? They were fully committed to cooperation from start to finish, and without a doubt never lost sight of the reason why they did this in the first place. They'd risked their lives and the lives of the people they loved the most. They set the bar high when it came to cooperation, and were a great example of people who truly wanted to change. Not just that, but their case was the biggest drug conspiracy case in U.S. history.
Listen, man, I don't know if I'm buying the you felt like you wanted to change angle. That comes after the fact. To me, the only factor in my mind, I get change and I get people going through that, but the question is, would you have wanted to change if the shit wasn't hitting the fan and there wasn't a split in the cartel and both sides was either wanted to keep you while the other side wanted to eat you? You know what I'm saying? Would you have wanted to change if everything was just fine and moving forward nice and quietly? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. To me, the only incentive I feel like I would have in that moment is listen, my family's in danger. That's the only thing that would make me think of doing what they did. Again, aside from the fact that it's something that people do in their game, like back and forth. The first thing is the family, the family, the family. And I feel like the judge is going to look like that. Like, man, did they want to change? If this wouldn't have gone bad, did they want to change? Or is the judge less informed and really not that into it anyway and not deep into the story and probably doesn't care? And he's just out there arbitrarily just making decisions. But I would have looked at them and said, like, nah, you was worried about your life. Don't talk to me about change right now.
Olivia. After Junior and Peter risked their lives in Mexico, and after everyone they'd helped bring in, I still believed passionately that they shouldn't do a day more than 10 years. Junior's lawyer had been reluctant to agree with me because he didn't want to piss off Judge Castillo. So before sentencing, I hired a new lawyer from New York to come in with a fresh set of eyes. I thought Jim, the new attorney, might push for 10.
Uh-oh. She went and got a second opinion. I don't know if that's gonna stir up some controversy in the back room, let alone the courtroom.
But instead, he did the opposite.
Oh.
I think you should accept the fact that they might get 16, he said. It's as simple as that. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, so even though it hurt, it was the reality of things. Suddenly, I saw the big picture, and by the time sentencing day rolled around, I was prepared for the worst and hoping for the best.
Mia. I couldn't believe it when sentencing day finally arrived. This was it. Everything we'd done and gone through together was going to come to an end in just a few hours. Everything depended on one man who had my future and the future of my children in his hands. His decision was going to determine my happiness. Peter was trusting someone else, too. Just before sentencing, he said, "I'm leaving it up to God to decide our fates. It's all up to him."
Olivia.
Here's the problem. The problem is that Judge Ruben Castillo thinks that he's God in that moment. You know what I mean? That's the problem.
That day, I had such mixed emotions. I was so eager to know Junior's future, but I was terrified about the outcome. I lay on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling paralyzed. Deep down, though, I kept thinking, Junior and I love each other so much that we can withstand anything. Our relationship is rock solid, so whatever the judge decides won't break us. But most of all, it was our children I was stressed about.
Mia. It snowed a lot on January.
I wonder if their children kind of like journal their feelings now, how they feel about their life and how they felt about their life and the things that they've gone through because of the lives that their parents chose. Because, you know, from a kid to an adult, man, things feel different, seem different. You forget things. You paint things differently in your mind as you get older. I wonder if they archive their thoughts now and journal their thoughts now, because down the line, you could expect 20 years from now a book coming from some of these kids, you know, talking about their experience. I wouldn't doubt it.
January 27th. So Bella and Blake were home from school. I hadn't said a thing to them about what was happening, but I think they knew something was up. They'd been following me around the house all day, almost obsessively. I'd been giving them tons of hugs and kisses, but it hadn't helped. Eventually, I basically barricaded myself in my room to clear my head and pray when I heard a knock on the door. "Mommy, can we play Chutes and Ladders with you?" asked Bella. "Sure, baby, sure," I answered, relieved someone was taking sentencing off my mind. "Whatever you need."
Olivia. We all felt so vulnerable because of our kids. Brenton and Benjamin had been babies when Junior turned himself in, doing the right thing so our children would have a better future. But here was the irony. They were growing up without seeing their father every day. In doing the right thing, we'd ended up hurting them. It got worse before sentencing, too. I was so stressed that I'd had trouble even focusing on my boys. I wasn't present at all. I was constantly upset. Junior was always sad, and my poor babies kept asking for their daddy to come home. I knew it was taking a toll on Brandon especially. He cried when we left our visits, he cried before he went to bed, and he even cried in the shower, for God's sake. So I took him to a child psychologist. I didn't go into the extent of our situation, like what Junior had done, but I told her my husband was in prison. After a few months of sessions, she and I met separately, and she reassured me. You and your husband are doing the best you can. You're good parents, she said. But my boys are a wreck, I pleaded. All they want is for their dad to come home. I'm a protector, and I feel like I've let Brandon down through all of this. She looked at me and got really serious. There are many children who don't have their fathers in their lives for different reasons.
Absolutely.
Some have dads who've died, while others have chosen not to be present. Then you have fathers who are so consumed by work and don't give their children the undivided attention they need. One day your husband will come home, but for right now your kids have 100% of their dad every single weekend. He's a great dad. He's there for them, and you're both doing the right thing. When they're grown up, that's what they're going to remember. Right then I decided, whatever Junior's sentence is going to be, it's not going to change us as a family. We've sacrificed more than most, and that's only made us closer. Still, my heart just ached for Junior to come home sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I don't doubt it one bit, but it is what it is. Things don't always go as we desire, and we don't always get what we want. You know what I mean? So, again, there's some kids out there that grow up without fathers, grow up without mothers. Some kids grow up with them and don't, wish they didn't. So, what they were going through wasn't different than what other people were going through in that sense. You know what I mean? In every other sense, yeah, it's hard for people to relate to what they were going through, but in that sense, many people can relate.
Mia. The day of sentencing, Peter and Junior were everywhere on the news. They even started trending on Yahoo. The TV broadcasts kept flashing a photo of them when they were 16, and suddenly Peter became that teenager I met 1,000,000 years ago. I started to remember being in my early 20s, so crazy about him, and how I always left a rose on my front doorstep, or how he'd called me at work just to brighten up my day. I wanted so badly to be with him, but I couldn't. Our lawyers had told us not to come, that it was far too dangerous. So on the most important day of our lives, instead of holding my husband's hand, I was home, playing Chutes and Ladders. I'd even called my lawyer that morning. I'll go to the court in a disguise. I'll wear a wig if I have to. I just need him to know he's not alone. No, he said. This is open to the public. You think people aren't going to try to find out if his wife is there?
Absolutely.
If I see you there, I'll drag you out myself.
Easy pickings. You're just popping up publicly to places that people know you're going to be at.
Olivia. That morning, Mia and I called each other every hour. I've heard nothing, I'd say. Have you? No, she'd answer, but the lawyer promises he'll call me.
Mia, I finally unplugged the TV just to be sure I wouldn't find out that way. I needed a real live person to talk to when their sentences were announced. Then, just before lunch, I started getting texts from my family, one after the other after the other. Are you okay? Did you hear? I'm praying for you. Oh, God, I thought. I hope it's not bad news. Then my phone rang, and it was Olivia. Her lawyer had just told her everything.
Olivia. From the minute they sat at our kitchen table in Guadalajara and decided to become informants, to the day they walked into court to find out their fates, Junior and Peter had never stopped helping the government. In fact, the morning of sentencing, they'd had a meeting with the feds to discuss yet another superseding indictment out of San Diego.
Bruh, them fools in that time got promotions telling them motherfuckers, man. They had them busy, boy. Took a couple of them high-power DEA agents' jobs and shit. 030 North in the chat said, how long does Valerie have to do The word is 3.5 for both of them. 3.5. And I don't know how that works in the feds. All I know is if that Emma Coronel chick got out and how whatever time, early time she got out, those wives should most definitely be getting out before her. You know what I'm saying? In a shorter time than her. If that don't happen, it's just blatant at that point.
The extradition of Mayo's sons, Mayito Gordo and Mayito Flaco. They signed those papers, followed by papers for Puerca's sister, La Patrona.
Mia. Then they walked into Judge Castillo's courtroom, sporting beige prison uniforms and buzz cuts, and were greeted by the U.S. attorneys and their assigned DEA agents, who'd voluntarily flown in just to speak on their behalf. They'd flown in because they were now stationed in different parts of the country. Peter and Junior hadn't laid eyes on each other in almost 5 years, and they hugged and cried when they met. They hadn't expected to be reunited until they came home from prison.
Olivia. It was a media frenzy, but who stood out were a few Mexican women sitting in the first row, their eyes burning holes in the backs of the twins' heads. Peter and Junior assumed they were related to some of the people that they'd cooperated against, but they never turned around to find out for sure.
Mia.
Why? Why didn't they turn around? It could feel like you being arrogant in these people's face doing that. Turn around, taking a look at them. Or was it shame? Or was it, what could it have been? Was what it was, that's for sure.
The U.S. attorneys started by giving a full account of Peter and Junior's crimes and cooperation. From the minimum of 60 tons of cocaine they'd trafficked into Chicago over the years, to the fact that their cooperation was unparalleled in the city's history and resulted in dozens of national and international arrests and convictions. While the attorneys made a point of saying that their cooperation wasn't 100% perfect, calling particular attention to the 276 kilograms of cocaine they'd trafficked without telling the government, and the fact—
Bro, the government is a big bitch, boy. It's an ungrateful bitch. That's what she is. An ungrateful, unfaithful girlfriend, just like Success. They gave them. These fools is letting them go into debt. They're letting them raise red flags about what they're doing by not, letting them just work the way they were working and make the money. So that everything looks perfect and you can get what you want. But they want to hold 270 grand that they had to get behind their back because these fools is just hanging them out there to dry. Like, government is a big hoe. Take. And then like, oh, one time they went and they did a deal without us. Well, every other deal I've done, I've exposed myself to the people that you're supposed to be protecting me from. But you're not helping me. So, at the end of the day, it's fuck you to the government. And they're absolutely giving you a fuck you themselves. They don't care. They're not worried about it.
calling particular attention to the 276 kilograms of cocaine.
Okay, I'm sorry. It wasn't 276 grams. It was 276 kilos. Dang.
They'd trafficked without telling the government, and the fact that they'd arranged for the pickup of—
I would have done 570 kilos without telling the government. The government wasn't helping me do shit.
And the fact that they'd arranged for the pickup of drug proceeds. They still showered them with praise.
Olivia. They cooperated at the height of their criminal enterprise, said U.S. Attorney Mike, who'd replaced Tom after he stepped down. These two defendants are the most valuable cooperators this district has ever seen in the context of a drug case, and as well, Your Honor, in the context of international money laundering related to drug trafficking charges. Then he gave specifics, saying, a massive criminal enterprise used to exist here in Chicago. It no longer exists, and they are directly responsible for that.
Mia.
Selling it.
He concluded by asking the judge for a sentence at or near the low end of the plea agreement, concluding 10 years would be best because their cooperation had been unprecedented, extraordinary, historic, incomprehensible.
And guess what? How many of these judges already, by the time this goes down, how many of these judges are already jaded by the fact that prosecutors have been telling them for years and years and years, this man is a notorious trafficker, the size of which we've never seen before, and all this hyperbole, right? And blowing up these little, street level guys into these monsters, right? To where they finally get the giant, and nobody believes that they got a giant. It's just these two little twins here. And these judges are not impressed when they tell them, listen, these guys are the reason that the trade even exists right now. They stop, the trade slows down, this happens, that happens. They're that big. And the judge is thinking, well, y'all been telling me he was that big, and he was that big, and he was that big. Nobody really paying attention, man. Everybody phoning in their job.
Words hardly ever used in a federal courtroom by a U.S. attorney. A man who'd spent almost 7 years working tirelessly to prosecute Peter and Junior practically begged the judge to go easy on them.
Olivia. Next, Junior and Peter addressed Judge Castillo, each taking turns. Junior went first, followed by Peter. Choking up, they both took full responsibility for their crimes, for the damage they'd caused, and for putting their families in harm's way. I know my actions deserve the greatest punishment, said Peter, and I'm grateful that the government has asked you to consider my work as a cooperator.
Mia. Then it was Judge Castillo's turn to speak. I think growing up in Chicago under different circumstances, both of you gentlemen probably would have accomplished a great deal if you had been law-abiding.
Okay, we're starting off on a good note. Judge could see that they might, they might have done something different. They might have franchised 50 McDonald's if they had the opportunity. Her voice of him is great. It's almost like Chapo, a little bit of Chapo, a little bit of Pete in there.
Because there's a lot of things you are, but stupid is not one of them. Calling them the most significant drug dealers that I've had to sentence in 20 years on the bench, and that's saying a lot. He didn't skirt the fact that their crimes were devastating and horrific. Then Judge Castillo paused and removed his glasses, looking them in the eyes. Sounding as stern as you'd expect of a judge who'd gotten as far as he had, he pointed out that their cooperation was imperfect and cited the 276 kilograms they'd trafficked without telling the feds. He admitted that while it was terrible they'd lost their father because of their cooperation, tens of thousands of others had lost their lives because of drugs, because of their drugs.
Olivia. Then, the judge gave them 14 years and ordered them to forfeit more than $3.5 million.
30.
He said he would have given them 12 years, closer to what the U.S. attorney had recommended, if they hadn't trafficked the 276 kilos.
Easy to say that shit when you're nice and safe sitting in your leather chair in your quarters with your robe on and shit, eating fucking oatmeal, you goofballs. It's easy. Them judges, I just watch them judges just pick people off in those videos all day. They just, it's one of the most arrogant positions, and people think it's a noble position. Maybe it's noble for a couple here and there, a couple judges here and there, but miss me with that shit.
The 276 kilos that had probably saved us our lives. My lawyer sent me a frickin' text message with the news. It said, 14 years. Sorry. When I called Mia right away, she lost it. When I say she lost it, I mean all you could hear was her scream and fall to the floor.
Mind you, think about it. Think about where we're at right now in their story, right? They were fighting over a 4-year discrepancy here, right? They ended up with 4, right? And she's screaming at the top of her lungs over that extra 4 years, right? Same as the crybaby killer. He cried over that extra whatever many years, right? She's wilding over whatever that many years. Look where they at now. That another 3.5 is off the table with them not together. You know what I mean? That's just bananas to even think about. Back then they was wilding out about that 4 years, but here we are, all these years later, after they served that 12.5-year sentence, after they went through everything that they went through, now the wives are back in there for 3.5. It's a crazy fucking story, man.
Mia. I was devastated. I kept thinking to myself, this is not what we planned. This is not what we did everything for. 14 years is not what we risked our lives for.
Olivia. For one of the first times in my life, I shut my mouth and listened to Mia sobbing. I didn't say a thing. In my mind, though, I was thinking, what are you upset about? Have you not been listening to me? I'd spent the last 7 years fighting with Peter's lawyer, obsessively calling Junior's lawyer, spending money on a fancy Manhattan lawyer, and even picking lawyers up at the airport to drive them to Junior's prison. All those miles and hours and money, and they'd all told me the same thing. Junior and Peter might get 16 years. Yet Mia and Peter had acted like it was a given that they were going to get 10 years. At one point, Mia had even said, I think they'll get time served. I'd shot back, you're out of your mind. They're going to get 16 years because the attorney I hired from New York is sure of it. We really have to listen to what these attorneys are telling us. Mia, I want 10 years just as much as you do. But I'm just trying to prepare you so you don't fall apart if the worst happens.
You gotta be realistic. And that's the thing, us as humans, we'll lie to ourselves just to feel better, and that's a defense mechanism. And if that's what Viv needed at the time, then it is what it is, you know what I'm saying?
We've been consumed by this for too long, and we've been thinking with our hearts and not with our heads. We have to be logical. She wouldn't even discuss it. No. That new lawyer is full of shit. They're going to get 10. Anytime I talk to Mia,
she was lying to herself, you know what I'm saying? But we do this. This is a natural thing. It's a defense mechanism, you know what I mean? We're going to tell ourselves the best outcome we could possibly have out of the whole list of worst outcomes that we could possibly have. Let's choose the best one. Let's run with that one.
I wanted to shake her. I felt like she was living in the Twilight Zone. All I could think was, what planet are you living on? What are you telling my brother-in-law? What is he telling you? But on the phone that day, I shut my trap. I was done arguing, and I knew we just needed to be close. We were all we had in the world, on this little island together, just the two of us. No matter how differently we felt about sentencing, or how we were dealing with it, all we could do was hold hands and get through this mess together.
Mia. The hardest part that day was pulling myself together so I could tell Peter's daughter, Sophia. I knew she was waiting for good news, and I wasn't sure how to break just the opposite to her. I decided all I could do was be honest, then encouraging. We love you, sweetie, I said. Please be strong. This will be over soon. When Peter's lawyer called me later that afternoon, I realized how much I needed that kind of pep talk myself. I'm not going to give up, he said. What? I asked. I was genuinely confused. I felt so defeated I'd crawled into bed and expected I'd stay there for days. I mean, I'm going to keep fighting. There's still hope. But you just keep supporting him. It's all you can do. Be the wife you've always been, that he needs you to be. He was right. And it was as true then as it is now. Being a good partner is the best I can do. Peter's done it for me, and I'll do it for him. When Peter called me the next day, literally the first minute he could get to the phone, we couldn't even speak. We just sat on the phone together and cried, feeling the exact same pain. For the first time, we couldn't hold each other up. We both felt so helpless that I started to wonder if my lawyer was all wrong. Maybe there isn't any hope, I worried. Then I managed
Val was trying to tell you your lawyer was all wrong. But again,
to choke a few words out. I love you so much, Peter. Everything is going to be okay. I love you too, he said, and I'm sorry I let you down. You didn't, I said. I will always be proud of you. Even as Junior and Peter have gone off to serve their sentences, Olivia and I have never stopped feeling honored by what our husbands did, especially now, when we've seen their cooperation rewarded in the biggest ways possible.
They saw their cooperation rewarded with almost the full sentence. They seen it rewarded with them almost allowing Jay to die from a septic shock in prison because they didn't believe him when they turned down his COVID release. They didn't believe that he got sick. They got thanked for their cooperation with their wives being locked away on something that probably could have been an income tax thing that would have been a month or two problem, has turned into a 3.5 year problem. Like, who knows? But it is what it is. We ask if it's worth it. We always want to ask if it's worth it. They get to speak to their children today. They get to talk to their children today. They're alive. They get to see their children flourish. That's what they got out the deal. They got out the deal to the opportunity to have a future eventually.